On the barren, isolated moon of Viroth, nothing much ever seemed to happen. It was a dry, dusty world, a place where human settlers mined minerals for the Galactic Trade Union, living out their quiet, monotonous days. For Leo, the young human, man stationed there, it was just another day on a lonely world. He kept to his routine, fixing equipment and running scans for potential mineral deposits. Yet, as he roamed the dusty surface on his usual patrol, a strange feeling hung in the air. Something had changed. There was an odd vibration in the ground, an unnatural hum. Leo, ever the curious sort, paused and looked toward the horizon. That was when he saw it. A flash of light, bright and sudden, blazed across the sky. It was like a falling star, only it didn't fade out. Instead, the fireball grew larger as it plummeted, trailing a long, glowing streak across the twilight sky. Leo's heart raced as he turned his vehicle toward the source of the light. His mind raced with possibilities. A meteor, a ship in distress. Whatever it was heading straight for Viroth. Without hesitation, Leo sped toward the crash site. He didn't know why, but something deep inside him urged him to go, to see this through. The surface was rough, the land sparse with craters and jagged rocks, but he knew the area well. It didn't take long for him to reach the crash site, where the impact had left a deep gouge in the dusty ground, sending debris scattering in all directions. The wreckage was scattered across a large area, and the ship was unlike any Leo had seen before. It wasn't a human vessel. Its design was sleek, smooth, and unlike anything from Earth or the colonies. The hull was scorched, blackened from the heat of entry. He slowly approached the wreckage, his pulse quickening as he scanned the surroundings. His instincts told him to be cautious, but his curiosity outweighed his caution. Suddenly a sound, low and throaty, broke through the air. Leo turned toward it, his breath catching in his throat as he saw her. The figure emerged from the wreckage, staggering as she tried to regain her footing. She was tall, with striking orange skin, her features sharp and angular. Her eyes, large and golden, glowed with a fierce intensity that made Leo take a step back, startled. Her hair was a wild mass of dark, tangled curls, and her attire looked like something out of an ancient legend, a mix of ragged fabrics and strange symbols etched across her chest. She looked as though she had just walked out of an old tale, a being from another world entirely. She raised her head, her gaze locking with Leo's. For a moment, neither of them moved. There was a rawness to her, an untamed quality that reminded Leo of something both dangerous and mesmerizing. She was like a storm on the horizon, beautiful, yet wild and unpredictable. "Who are you?" Leo asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The woman's lips curled into a half-smile, her sharp teeth glinting in the light. "I am Ira," she said, her voice deep and rich, carrying an unspoken command. Her accent was foreign, rough, like a language that hadn't been spoken in centuries. "And you? Are you one of them?" Leo was unsure what she meant, but he nodded, trying to remain calm. "I'm Leo, from the human mining colony here on Viroth. What happened? Are you okay?" Ira gave him a look as if measuring him up. "I'm fine," she muttered, then added, "Not many come here willingly." Her tone was distant, almost as if she was speaking to herself. She took a step toward him, her movements graceful despite the strain of the crash. Leo could see the signs of an injury, but it didn't seem to slow her down. She was strong, resilient. The kind of strength that didn't come from physical power alone, but from a deep inner resolve. Her wildness was evident in every step she took, every glance she gave. "Why did you come here?" she asked, her voice sharper now, distrust creeping into her tone. Leo hesitated. There was a strange pull in his chest, an inexplicable need to help her, despite the warnings that echoed in his mind. He had heard stories of the alien tribes, of the nomadic races that roamed the far reaches of space. But none of them were like Ira. Her people were rumored to be dangerous, unpredictable, and feared across many systems. "I saw your ship crash," he said simply, stepping forward slightly. "I'm here to help. Do you need assistance?" Ira's Golden eyes narrowed, studying him carefully. Help? From a human? She almost laughed, though the sound was more mocking than amused. You're the last kind of help I need. Leo winced at her harsh words but pressed on. You don't have to trust me, but I can help. You're hurt. She didn't respond at first, turning away to look at her wrecked ship. Her expression was unreadable, but the way she clenched her fists suggested a deep frustration. Finally, she sighed as if surrendering to some inner battle. I'll need shelter, she muttered. My ship's gone, and I have no time to waste. Leo didn't hesitate. I can take you back to the colony. It's not much, but it's a safe place to rest. You can repair your ship there. Ira hesitated, but then nodded. Fine. Lead the way, human. As they walked back to his transport vehicle, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake. Yet, in that moment, he knew there was something about Ira that was different, something he couldn't quite explain. She wasn't just an alien. She was an enigma, wild, free, and untamable. And something about her stirred a feeling in him that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He glanced at her, the orange hue of her skin glowing in the soft light of Viroth's twin suns. There was a wildness in her eyes that matched the storm brewing in his chest. The road ahead was uncertain. Ira was not the kind of person most humans would help, and he knew there were dangers waiting for him. But for reasons he couldn't understand, Leo felt drawn to her. The colony, his comrades, the familiar routine, none of it seemed to matter anymore. In this strange alien woman, Leo had found something he didn't even know he was looking for, and somehow he knew his life would never be the same again. As the days passed, Leo and Ira spent more time together. The human miner did his best to help her get comfortable in the small colony on Viroth, though Ira was clearly uncomfortable with the idea. She was used to a life of freedom, moving from place to place, never staying in one spot for too long. The idea of being confined to a small colony full of humans was as strange to her as the concept of loyalty and friendship. The colony itself was a modest outpost, nothing more than a few buildings clustered around a mining operation. The settlers had made it a home, but it was far from a bustling city. Leo had grown used to the quiet, the silence of the barren moon, and the occasional interactions with the other miners. But Ira? She could hardly sit still for a moment. Her restless energy filled the small quarters that Leo had offered her, and she spent hours wandering the barren landscape, her fiery skin glowing under the harsh suns of Viroth. Leo couldn't help but notice how different she was from the people. He knew. Most of the settlers on Viroth were practical, hard-working folks who had come to the moon for one purpose: to mine precious minerals and send them back to the Galactic Trade Union. But Ira wasn't like that. She had a fire in her, a spark that couldn't be contained by the walls of a colony or the expectations of others, and it both intrigued and unsettled him. One evening, as Leo sat in the small mess hall of the colony, trying to relax after a long day's work, he heard the door swing open. He looked up and saw Ira standing in the doorway, her golden eyes scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. You should have stayed inside, Leo said, his voice calm but firm. It's dangerous out there. Ira tilted her head, a small, almost playful smile curling on her lips. I'm not some fragile flower, Leo, she said, her voice carrying a trace of amusement. I can handle myself. Leo sighed, rubbing his temples. It's not about fragility. It's about survival. Viroth's a harsh place, and you're not used to it. Her eyes flickered with a mix of defiance and understanding. You think I don't know that? I've survived worse than this. Leo leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Maybe. But you're not the only one here who needs to survive. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. You really don't get it, do you? Ira said, her voice softening. I don't need you to protect me, Leo. I'm not some lost soul looking for salvation. I've been living my life on my own for a long time, and I've gotten by just fine. Leo studied her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. There was truth in her words, but there was also something else. Ira wasn't just a survivor, she was a warrior, someone who had been forced to live on the edge of society, someone who had learned to fend for herself in a galaxy that didn't always welcome her kind. "You don't have to be alone," Leo said, quietly, his voice more vulnerable than he intended. "You don't have to keep running." Ira's gaze softened for a brief moment, but she quickly masked it with a distant, almost cold expression. "I don't run. Not anymore." The tension between them lingered, but Leo couldn't help but feel a connection, a bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. Ira was not like the women he had known back on Earth or in the colonies. She was wild, unpredictable, and fiercely independent. But there was something beneath her tough exterior, something Leo wanted to understand. "I'm not asking you to change," Leo said finally, his voice steady. "But I'm asking you to trust me. Let me help." Ira was silent. For a long moment, her eyes studying him. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully, deciding whether to let her guard down or keep it firmly in place. Finally, she spoke, her tone softer than before. "You think that's what I need?" she asked, a trace of amusement returning to her voice. "You think I need someone to help me?" Leo met her gaze, not backing down. "Maybe not now, but there may come a time when you'll need more than just yourself. No one can do everything alone." Ira's expression hardened again, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She turned and walked toward the small window overlooking the moon's barren surface. The light from the two suns cast long shadows across the dusty landscape, and for a moment, Ira seemed lost in thought. "I've had enough of people trying to save me," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've had enough of being a prisoner to someone else's expectations." Leo stood up and moved closer to her, his voice gentle. "I'm not trying to save you, Ira. I'm just offering a choice. You don't have to accept it, but if you ever want to stay, if you ever want to have a place where you're not running, I'll be here." Ira turned to face him, her golden eyes intense and unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, charged with unspoken emotions that neither was willing to acknowledge. But in that moment, Leo knew something had changed. Ira was starting to trust him, even if just a little. "Fine," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'll stay for now, but don't expect me to change who I am." Leo nodded. "I wouldn't dream of it." The next few days passed in a blur of work and quiet moments. Ira continued to roam the moon's surface, gathering supplies and information for her ship's repair. Leo helped her when he could, offering tools, assistance, and his knowledge of the terrain. Though Ira still resisted the idea of settling down, she began to rely on Leo more, and a subtle shift occurred in their relationship. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something else. Something more complicated. Ira had always been a lone wolf. But Leo was showing her that it didn't have to be that way. And as they spent more time together, Leo started to understand Ira's pain and her fear of being vulnerable. She had been hurt, betrayed, and rejected so many times that she had built walls around herself to protect her heart. But Leo wasn't going to give up. He knew that Ira was more than the wild, untamable woman she presented to the world. There was a softness in her, a vulnerability buried beneath the surface, and Leo was determined to find it. He wasn't sure how, but he was willing to try. As the days passed, Leo and Ira continued to grow closer, their partnership becoming more than just a means of survival. It was a connection, a bond that neither of them had expected. And as the future stretched before them, they both knew that the road ahead would be anything but easy. But whatever challenges they faced, Leo was certain of one thing: he wasn't going to let Ira face them alone. Days had turned into weeks since Leo had first encountered Ira, and though the tension between them remained, it was now tempered by a growing sense of understanding. They had developed a routine, one where their differences were less important than their shared goal: getting Ira's ship repaired so she could leave Viroth. But as much as Leo tried to convince her to stay longer, Ira remained determined to leave. She had her own life to live, one that didn't involve staying in a small human colony forever. One evening, Leo was finishing his work at the colony when Ira entered the room with a determined look on her face. Her golden eyes shone with urgency, and there was a fire in her movements that Leo knew all too well. She was preparing for something. "I need to go," Ira said, her voice calm but firm. "My people need me." Leo looked up from the tools he was organizing, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, your people?" Ira hesitated, her gaze dropping briefly before meeting his again. "I received a message. A distress signal from my tribe." Leo's heart sank. He had known there was something more to Ira's past, something she hadn't yet shared. But this was unexpected. He had no idea what kind of trouble she could be facing. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to face it alone. "You need help?" Leo asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Ira's people had always been a mystery to him. Outlaws, nomads who didn't trust anyone, including other aliens. It was hard for him to even imagine what kind of help they might need. Ira took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I don't know if I want your help. My people, they've never needed anyone else. They've always been able to survive on their own." She paused for a moment, as if considering her next words. "But this time, they're in danger. And if I don't get to them soon, it could be too late." Leo stood up, moving toward her. "I don't know what's going on, but I can't let you go alone. If your people are in danger, we have to try to help." Ira's golden eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, she seemed to be searching for something deep within him. She finally sighed, her shoulders sagging as if she had made up her mind. "Fine, but we do this my way. I'm not waiting around for anyone to tell me what to do." Leo nodded. He didn't care about the details, not right now. He only cared about making sure Ira was safe. Whatever her people had done or not done in the past, she deserved more than to be left alone in whatever danger lay ahead. Ira turned away, heading toward the door. "We leave at dawn. I'll show you where to go." Leo followed her outside into the chill of Viroth's night. The twin moons cast a pale glow across the landscape, their light illuminating the cracked, dusty surface of the moon. Leo knew the terrain well. It was nothing like Earth, with jagged rocks and wide open stretches of barren land. It wasn't a place that offered much hope, but it was a place that had forced both Leo and Ira to survive. Ira moved with purpose, and Leo had learned by now that when she was focused, nothing could distract her. They made their way across the desolate landscape, and though Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, he didn't question her. If Ira was set on finding her people, he would help her, no matter the risks. As the first light of dawn broke, over the horizon, Ira stopped and pointed to a distant ridge. "That's where we'll find them. My tribe is near there." Leo nodded, though a feeling of dread lingered in his chest. He wasn't sure what kind of trouble Ira's people could be in, but the urgency in her voice told him it was serious. They began their trek toward the ridge, and as they walked, Leo couldn't help but notice how much Ira had changed in the weeks they had spent together. She was still fierce, still wild, but there was something else now. There was trust. Trust. In him. Something that hadn't been there before. They walked in silence for a long while, the harsh winds of Viroth biting at their skin. Leo's mind raced as he tried to think of anything that could prepare them for whatever was waiting ahead. As they neared the ridge, Leo could see the distant outlines of figures, shapes that seemed to shimmer in the low light. There were other beings there, but they were too far to identify. Ira's pace quickened, and Leo did his best to keep up. "Are they the ones who sent the message?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," Ira replied, her voice tight with worry. "They're my family, and I can't afford to lose them." As they reached the top of the ridge, they saw what had caused the distress signal. A group of mercenaries, large, heavily armed, had surrounded a camp of Ira's people. Leo's heart pounded as he saw the fear in the eyes of the nomads, who were struggling to defend themselves, but it was clear that the mercenaries were too powerful. Ira's people were outmatched. Without thinking, Leo moved toward the edge of the ridge, adrenaline surging through his veins. "We need to do something," he said urgently. Ira grabbed his arm, stopping him. "No, I know what they want," she said, her voice low. "They want our technology, our weapons. If we fight, it could make things worse." Leo turned to her, his brow furrowed. "So what do we do?" Ira's gaze softened for a brief moment, and then she gave a small, determined nod. "We wait. We make our move when they least expect it." The two of them crouched behind a large rock, observing the mercenaries as they bargained with Ira's people. The exchange was tense, and Leo could sense that Ira was growing more and more anxious with each passing second. Finally, the mercenaries seemed to reach an agreement. They were about to leave, but not without a parting threat. Ira stiffened as she saw one of the mercenaries raise his weapon to strike one of her people. Without warning, she sprang into action. Leo could barely react before she had already charged down the ridge, moving with the speed and precision of a predator. She was no longer the wild woman he had first met. She was the leader of her people, fighting to protect them. Leo followed close behind, heart pounding. Whatever was happening, whatever danger Ira faced, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Together, they would fight. Together, they would win. The sounds of the mercenaries' retreat faded into the distance, and the camp was finally calm. But calmness did not equal peace. Ira stood at the edge of the small encampment, her fists clenched, her chest rising and falling rapidly from the exertion. The tension in her posture, the way she held herself so rigidly, told Leo that the fight wasn't over. Not for her. Not yet. Leo approached slowly, his footsteps tentative as he watched her stare out into the distance. Her eyes narrowed, as if trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The mercenaries were gone, but they had left a trail of destruction in their wake, and Ira's people were still reeling from the encounter. Ira's people had survived worse. Leo was sure of that. Yet he could see that this was different. Ira's trust in her people had been shaken. In all the time they had spent together, Leo had seen her as fierce and unyielding, but this moment revealed a side of her he hadn't fully understood, vulnerable, perhaps even afraid. "I thought I was done running," Ira muttered, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke more to herself than to Leo. She finally turned to face him, her golden eyes clouded with uncertainty. "But every time I think I've found peace, something like this happens." Leo moved closer, standing by her side. "What happened? Why are they after you? I thought your people were free from this kind of thing." Ira's shoulders sagged slightly and she sighed deeply. "We were. But we've been hiding for so long, Leo. My tribe, they live outside the laws of most other alien races. We roam the galaxy, surviving by our own rules. But it's become harder and harder to escape the notice of the ones who want to use us. They want our technology, our knowledge, and some of us, we've made enemies." Leo's brow furrowed. He had heard of nomadic alien tribes, but he didn't realize the extent of the danger they faced. The galaxy wasn't a safe place for outcasts like Ira's people. Even as independent as they were, they couldn't always outrun those who hunted them. "I'm sorry," Leo said, his voice softer now, as he realized the weight of the burden Ira had been carrying all these years. "You're not just running from people, you're running from the past. From your own people, from what happened to you and what could happen again." Ira shook her head, her gaze flickering away from him, focusing on the campfire that flickered in the middle of the clearing. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can keep running, hiding, only to be hunted down again." Leo could feel the pain in her words, the raw emotion that she had been keeping hidden for so long. "Ira, you don't have to do this alone anymore. I'm here. We're not going to let you face this alone. You don't have to hide anymore. You're not alone." Ira remained silent for a long moment, her face unreadable. She looked at the faces of her people, many of whom were injured or afraid, and for the first time, Leo saw the depth of her internal struggle. There was a fire in her, but that fire was burning her up from the inside. She had never truly belonged to anyone or anything, and now she had to decide what was worth fighting for. "Leo, I've been running my whole life. Ira said, her voice trembling slightly now. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to let go of the fear, the pain. I've seen so much of it. My family, my people, have had to live like this. For generations, always fighting, always running. Leo stepped closer to her, his voice firm but kind. But it's different now, Ira. You've got a chance to build something better. You've got a chance to have peace, to stop running. Ira finally turned to face him fully, her eyes meeting his. There was a vulnerability there now. Something Leo had never seen before. And what if I'm not strong enough to stop running? What if I'm not strong enough to fight anymore? Leo placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to fight alone, Ira. You've already proven that you're strong. You've survived things most people couldn't even imagine. You're not alone anymore. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Ira's walls cracked, just a little. She looked down at the ground, her eyes closing as if trying to hold back a flood of emotions. She was scared, Leo could see that. But she wasn't running anymore. She was finally starting to understand that she had people who cared for her, people who would stand by her side. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Ira said quietly, her voice shaky. Someone who actually wants to stay. Leo's heart skipped a beat. I'm not going anywhere, Ira. You've shown me more about strength than anyone ever has. You've shown me what it means to survive, to fight for what matters. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. The moment hung between them, fragile and delicate, as if either one of them could shatter the delicate connection they had forged, but neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The sounds of the night, the wind whispering through the trees, the crackling of the fire, all faded into the background as Leo and Ira stood there, facing each other. Finally, Ira took a deep breath, her golden eyes filled with something new. It wasn't the fiery, wild spirit Leo had seen in her before. This time, it was something different, something softer, more accepting. I don't know what's going to happen, Leo. I don't know if my people will ever be free of the ones chasing us. But if we're going to survive this, we're going to do it together. Leo smiled, a weight lifting from his chest. Together, he agreed. We'll face it together. Over the next few hours, Ira spoke more about her past, about her people, the reasons they were hunted, and the things she had witnessed. Leo listened, never interrupting, letting her speak as much or as little as she wanted. He could see the weight she carried, the burden of being the leader of a people who had always been on the run. But he also saw something else, something he had never noticed before. Ira wasn't just a survivor. She was a leader, a protector, someone who was willing to do whatever it took to keep her people safe. Leo had always known that Ira was strong, but now he saw that she was also capable of finding peace, of stopping the endless cycle of fear and running. He just had to believe in her. They both did. As the stars above began to fill the sky, Leo made a silent promise to himself. Whatever came next, whatever battles they had to fight, he wouldn't let Ira face them alone. They would build a future together, and he would stand by her side. Forever. The night was quiet after the long hours of planning and talking. Ira's people had gathered around the fire, trying to regroup after the mercenaries' attack. Leo sat on the edge of the camp, looking out at the dark horizon. He had never expected to be in a situation like this. Caught between a nomadic alien tribe, a human colony, and the dangerous forces that had pursued Ira and her people for years. But as he watched Ira moving around the camp, directing her people, taking charge, he felt a deep sense of pride for her. She had always been strong, but now she was more than that. She was the leader her people needed. Ira had finally made the choice. She had decided not to run anymore, not from her past, and not from her future. She was ready to stand and fight for her people, and for the first time, Leo felt like he was part of that fight. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the camp. Ira walked over to Leo, her expression calm, but there was something in her eyes, a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She had always been a fierce spirit, but now there was a quiet strength in her that spoke of someone who had found peace within themselves. Leo looked up as she approached, offering her a small smile. "You're still awake." Ira smiled faintly and sat down beside him. "I don't sleep much when there's so much to do." Leo chuckled softly. "You're not the only one." For a moment they sat in silence, just listening to the sounds of the night, the occasional rustle of leaves, the distant howl of some animal, the soft crackling of the fire. Each sound felt like a small piece of normalcy in a life that had been anything but. Leo had been stationed on Vyroth for months, but he had never experienced anything like this. The danger, the uncertainty, and the strange bond that had formed between him and Ira. "I don't know what happens next," Ira said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. "I don't know if my people will ever be free of the ones who are hunting us, and I don't know what my future looks like anymore." Leo turned to her, his gaze serious. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. We'll face whatever comes together." Ira met his gaze, her golden eyes searching his face, trying to find some sign that he meant it. And she did. There was no hesitation in his eyes. Leo was here, and he was staying. The fear that had once clung to her heart, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of losing everything, slowly it began to fade. Maybe they didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in her life, Ira was beginning to understand that maybe it didn't matter. She smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached her eyes. "You really mean that, don't you?" Leo nodded, his voice steady. "I do." There was no turning back now. The decision had been made. Together they would face the future, no matter how uncertain it seemed. Ira had spent her whole life running from things, hiding from her past, but now she was ready to stand. And Leo was ready to stand with her. The next few days were a blur of activity. The nomads began preparing for a new phase of their existence. They would no longer run from danger. They would face it head on, and they would do it together. Leo, now fully invested in their cause, helped with whatever he could. From repairing equipment to keeping watch over the camp, he did everything he could to ensure the survival of Ira's people. Ira, too, took charge. She trained her people, teaching them how to defend themselves against the mercenaries and any other threats they might face. She was a natural leader, her charisma drawing others to her, and Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he watched her. She was everything she had always claimed to be, fierce, strong, and untamable. But now she was also something else. She was a protector, a beacon of hope for those who had no one else to turn to. It wasn't long before the first real test came. A new group of mercenaries arrived on Vyroth. They were bigger, better equipped, and better trained. It was clear they were not here to negotiate. They had come for one reason: to capture Ira's people, to take their technology, and to enslave them. Leo knew what was at stake. If they lost this fight, everything would be over. But he also knew they weren't going down without a fight. Ira would never let that happen, and neither would he. The battle began at dawn. Ira's people were ready. They had trained for this moment, and though they were outnumbered, they were not outmatched. Leo fought alongside them, his mind focused and sharp, his body moving with precision. It was the first real battle he had ever been part of, but it didn't feel strange. It felt like the right thing to do. He was protecting something worth fighting for, someone worth fighting for. Ira fought beside him, her strength and skill unmatched. She moved like a force of nature, swift and powerful, her golden eyes burning with determination. Leo couldn't keep up with her speed, but he didn't need to. They were a team, each playing their part, each moving with a sense of purpose that was unshakable. As the battle raged on, Leo found himself at the front lines, his pulse quickening, as he took down mercenary after mercenary. But he never lost sight of Ira. She was always there, just ahead of him, always a step ahead in the fight. He felt a strange sense of pride as he watched her, pride for her strength, for the woman she had become. The battle lasted hours, but in the end it was Ira's people who emerged victorious. The mercenaries were defeated and Ira's tribe was safe, for now. The cost had been high. Several of Ira's people were injured, and Leo had taken a few cuts and bruises himself, but it was nothing compared to what they had won. Ira stood over the battlefield, her chest heaving with exertion, her hair wild and disheveled. She looked like a warrior, like someone who had been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. Leo walked up to her, his breath still heavy, from the fight. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Ira looked at him, her eyes softening. "We did it," she corrected him, her voice quiet but filled with pride. For a moment they stood there together, watching as the survivors began to gather around, tending to the wounded, securing their camp. The battle had been won, but there was still much to be done. They were far from safe, but for the first time Ira felt a sense of hope. "I think I can finally stop running," Ira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "You don't have to run anymore, you found your place." And together they would build that place, piece by piece. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Ira knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone. She had Leo, and with him there was nothing they couldn't face. This part emphasizes their victory and growth as a couple, as well as the bond they've forged through their struggles. It shows Ira's transition from running to standing strong and fighting for a future she can finally trust. Let me know if you need any adjustments.